This week on Quality Digest Live, we'll chat with Jamie Chumas of Sparta Systems about data, dashboards, and decision making.
Plus, how one company sustains their 5S efforts. That and more when we come back. Welcome back to Quality Digest Live for September 11th, 2015. QDL is your weekly look at who and what is making the news in the world of quality. I'm Dirk Ducharme, Editor-in-Chief of Quality Digest.
That he is, and I'm Quality Digest publisher Mike Richmond. Well, one of the biggest issues affecting today's extremely complex and interconnected business world is that of cybersecurity. Not so long ago, hacking was considered novel and harmless, more kind of a practical joke really than a major concern for many. But with the increasingly common and ever more damaging waves of cyber attacks on personal, commercial, and governmental sites, one really doesn't consider this such a trivial matter anymore. The Cybersecurity Enhancement Act of 2014 directed NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, to develop international technical standards dealing with the security of informational systems. Last month, NIST announced the release of draft Interagency Report 8074 regarding, quote, strategic U.S. government engagement in international standardization to achieve U.S. objectives for cybersecurity, unquote. I had to make sure that was quoted because I didn't want people to think that I actually wrote that myself.
That was a government report.
And tried to wrap that around my own speaking style, because that was definitely from the government. Well, the report from the government, which came out of an interagency working group, recommends that the government put forth a greater effort to coordinate the participation of its employees in developing international cybersecurity standards, as well as promoting the security and resiliency of U.S. information and communication systems and supporting infrastructures. The report calls for increased training, closer collaboration with private industry, and better efforts to minimize threats to privacy. And again, this is a draft version of the report, and public comments are certainly being encouraged and accepted. And the date until you can submit your comments is from now until September 24th, so still a couple more weeks. Comments can be emailed to nistir8074@nist.com with the subject line, quote, comments on draft NIST-IR 8074. For more information, including a link out to that report, as well as the email address, probably a little easier than you typing that in now, be sure to check out the NIST story, which you can find just below this video player screen right down there. And as with all these things, Eric, I mean, yes, you know, if you have an interest in this and you're working in cybersecurity or you just really are a quality person that wants to comment on this, NIST does want those comments. And comments really help a lot in terms of, as we all know, developing standards and making sure that the buy-in is there for users. So, you know, definitely read the story. It was an interesting article from NIST, an interesting news piece from NIST, and the link is there where you can comment on that too.
There was an interesting, oh man, I can't remember who said it. It was some government guy who was on the news the other day talking about they look at cyber attacks. Is it espionage or is it terrorism? If it's espionage. Mm-hmm. From a foreign entity like, you know, China or something like that, he kind of went, well, you know, we don't really get too upset about it because after all, we do the same thing. So it's like, you can't point the finger a little bit too much. If it's terrorism, that's another thing. So there's this distinction of trying to decide whether a cyber attack is an act of terrorism or simply espionage.
Right.
I thought that was pretty funny. If it's espionage, well, okay, whatever.
Well, and to tell you the truth, a lot of the espionage really is more internal. It's not even external to the U.S. Right. A lot of the espionage is going on from company to company within the U.S. And it's nothing political. It's just like, well, let's find out what their secret sauce is, right? I mean, so not that that's not damaging and not that shouldn't be protected, but yeah, this idea of figuring out, you know, is this really an attack? Is it just kind of trying to find some information out? That's really important.
Well, I just thought it was funny. It's like, well, you know, the Chinese, they do it to us, we do it to them. We do.
Yeah, let it go.
Right. Okay. Well, data everywhere, but from which pool shall I drink to?
Well said, Dirk.
Yes, borrow from a poem. That is actually basically the problem in today's data generating and data gobbling world. We're talking about big data and little data, you know, bad data, even useless data. It doesn't matter, we just can't get enough of it. And if you aren't collecting data and presenting it on a dashboard, you're like, so 2010. So you would think that us quality folk, those of us who use enterprise quality management system software, wouldn't fall prey to the give me more data trap. We must be gathering quality data, right? There must be a reason for it. Well, maybe not. When data is available to be gathered, we just tend to gather it. So the issue then becomes how and what kind of data should we gather in order to forward our operational and business goals? How can we collect, transform, aggregate, correlate, visualize our data in a meaningful way? Where do we start? Well, I don't know. But fortunately, our next guest, Jamie Chumas, Senior Product Manager at Sparta Systems and author of Data, Dashboards, and Decisions, Generating Quality Results, well, he knows. So, hi, Jamie. Welcome to the show.
Hey, guys. Thanks so much. Thanks for having me on.
Okay. Well, as I just said, it seems that everywhere we turn, businesses are obsessed with collecting data. And sometimes it seems it's just collecting data for the sake of collecting data. So what kind of problems, in your opinion, is this causing? And maybe perhaps you even have an example of some of the real problems that this causes.
Sure. And of course, when you're collecting data beyond just the fact that you have to store, back up the data, when you're talking about regulated systems, if that data, for instance, is on forms for intake, then people are being trained on all the data that they might need to or that might be available on that form. And just dealing with the large sets of data in general can be challenging, but specifically in regulated environments, anything that's in your system is open for audits. And when we look at that causes potential issues when auditors come in and they may start digging because there's so much data in your system, and you may not necessarily have story to tell about it. But you asked for, I believe, like a specific example, and we look at sometimes when companies put together collection forms in EQMS systems, they always include like a general comments field. And that kind of opens up the gates for anecdotal or opinions and stuff like that can also cause problems during audits.
So Jamie, you mentioned in your piece that you first have to you have to decide basically what you want to learn from your data. So do you mean by that you have to even decide what data to collect, or you're talking about how much data you have to collect? What do you actually mean by that?
So there's a couple things, and I'm going to separate out what to collect versus how much. A couple customers, for instance, they were looking to do or report on right the first time. And when you look at something like right the first time, it's easy, it's like, well, what percentage got rejected versus which was successful. But to really get value and make decisions, you need to probably capture some sort of a reason code as to why it was rejected. Because if you're seeing a low right the first time, then you want to take action as to how to improve that, and you need specifics. And if you don't capture reason code, a lot of times in a reject format, there may be an optional comments field or summary to say why you're doing it, but not everybody fills it out, and it's not filled correctly. So that's an example. If you know what you want your outcome to be, you can plan what data to collect. On another example, or in another example, we work with a customer. It was actually a manufacturing person who was an executive sponsor on a Kappa system, and they were interested or wanted to have their manufacturing sites be aware of Kappa that were being opened across other manufacturing sites. And what they wanted them to do was look at reports of Kappa that had been approved for investigation, actually had a root cause code or a root cause identified, and then take a look within their organization and see if that particular event could possibly occur in their site and create a preventive action, sort of to be proactive. What he saw, or what the VP of manufacturing saw, was that a lot of times there'd be a problem at one site and then it would occur later on down the line at another site, and if they'd been proactive about it, they might be able to they could manage it. So that forced the form collection to include a reference when they opened up a preventive action, so that they could say, I opened up this preventive action because a Kappa at another site was open. and they actually created a report called Kappa Leverage. How many preventive actions am I creating leveraging the work that was done on a given Kappa? So that's an example of, where I want to get a report, but I might not have had that reference field in it because I don't know what I want. I may not know what I want to get when I'm just designing the forms and the collection part.
Well, I mean, okay, so we've talked a little bit about collection, and then very often after that, you want to display stuff. Sometimes it's it's in a report, sometimes it's in a dashboard. I've seen a lot of dashboards, and kind of in my opinion, dashboards often show you data that you really don't even care about. It's kind of meaningless. It doesn't forward the goals of the company. It's just a graphic for the sake of having a graphic, it seems like. So, I mean, how should you decide what kind of dashboard you need, and even how it should display the data, the method in which the data is going to be shown visually, so that the information it shows is actually informative and actionable?
So I absolutely agree with you about the dashboards being kind of really busy and having a lot on it. And I think part of that is because as the BI tools that people use to create those dashboards became mature and included more bells and whistles, the developers just got excited and just started adding stuff to them and really kind of didn't look at it from a user experience perspective. Because if you think about these dashboards, in a sense, they're mini applications depending on how complex. But to your question about what should go on them, I think you have to look at the different user types or the personas and what they need to gather from them. I mean, I see that it's still in this culture, we're still an email-driven, notification-driven culture, right? The first thing people do when they sit down at a shift or in the morning when they get to the office is, well, let me load up my email and see what's there. The shift should be to dashboards, and the dashboards should be designed for what it is that they need to get done, or what urgency there may be surrounding what they need to get done. So stuff as simple as, what's coming due, what's overdue, of course, and what's actually on plan, so that I have a good sense of for my role, what's in store for me for that day or that week. Now, of course, it's somebody in a supervisory role would want to see something similar, but across the different people in their group. And so these dashboards can be fairly simple and only probably include 3, 4, or 5 different views or charts. And with some of the tools today, you don't necessarily have to build in what visualization you want to use. You can have that as a selected value for the consumer. If I want to see something in a donut chart versus a pie chart, so if I don't want to be edible that day, I might want to put it in a bar or some other chart. So that's a simplistic way to look at it. We've also seen and helped build some sophisticated dashboards that help customers identify supplier risks. So I've got 10 or 12 suppliers, and some of them actually supply me the same material, and I can look and say, wow, the risk on this one's a lot lower. Maybe for the next few months I'm going to source from the lower risk supplier versus the higher risk. And there's enough data around, and I think the one thing that I'll say positively is customers have done a better job of governance. I mean, it used to be the whole thing garbage in, garbage out. I think they're doing a better job with cleaning up what's there so that it can then be reported on it.
Okay. Well, Jamie, we are going to be talking, or you're going to be talking, I'm going to be hosting more on this topic, data, dashboards, and decisions at a webinar coming up next week, next Tuesday, September 15th at 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific. And you're going to be diving into that a little bit more. So for our audience out there, if you're interested in seeing how to pick your data and how to what decisions should drive your data, you're going to want to tune into this webinar. So, Jamie Chumas, Senior Product Manager at Sparta Systems, thanks for joining us this morning.
Thanks a lot, guys. Have a good day.
Okay, you too.
You too. Thanks, Jamie. Yes.
Yep.
And for all of you out there, yes, as always, you can look forward to your email for information about that webinar. Jamie's article is right below the player page right down there, an article that Jamie wrote that appeared this week in Quality Digest Daily. There's a link to the webinar in there too, so if you're interested in data and dashboards and decision making, check out that webinar, make sure you register for it, and we'll see you then on Tuesday for for that, Dirk and Jamie.
Yep.
Alrighty. Well, our next piece, Sustaining Quality Improvements, a case study. It was written by yours truly, and it appeared in Wednesday's issue of Quality Digest Daily. You can see it right there. Wednesday we ran that in QDD, and this article looks at a local manufacturer here in Chico, Northern California, called FAFCO. FAFCO is a local manufacturer here in town, and they make solar energy systems. They make the equipment that people use for solar energy, which of course is an emerging field, and it's an important one, I think we all can agree. Now, FAFCO is a lean organization, and they've been a lean organization for many, many years. They're very devoted to lean process and lean manufacturing. So last year, when our training division, 360 Performance Circle, needed a manufacturer for filming some of our Creating and Sustaining Lean Improvements training series, which of course stars our good friend Mike Mickelwright, FAFCO was a natural fit. So we needed Dirk, we needed a place where we could go, where we could shoot a bunch of stuff, right? I mean,
right.
Certainly we needed a real world manufacturing environment that was operating with lean principles. So we used FAFCO, good friends of ours at FAFCO,
right.
good people, and we went down there and shot. So we had a lot of good footage we got from FAFCO. So one of the segments that we shot at FAFCO right there was a complete 5S effort in their in their maintenance department. We didn't just shoot it, by the way. Mike Mickelwright, who again is a renowned lean trainer, he actually led an intensive 2-day effort to implement 5S from soup to nuts in FAFCO's maintenance department. It was a very, very interesting process to see unfold. And of course, we've shot it all, we filmed it, and we used it for our 5-part series on 5S. That we have our Creating and Sustaining Lean Improvements training series. Now, the article that I wrote looks back at that. We took another look at this. It's a year ago, more than a year ago that we did this. So we looked back a year and we focused on the fifth and the most elusive part of 5S, which is sustainment. And you know, if you've ever done 5S or if you've ever worked in a lean environment, you know that sustaining 5S is really the most important and the most difficult part of it, because it's exciting to do the cleanup and the reorganization and get everything up to snuff, but then can you sustain it? Can you do it for a year, for 2 years and more? So we wanted to look back now a year in the past and see how FAFCO is doing. So I interviewed Eddie Hernandez, who's FAFCO's Continuous Improvement Coordinator, and he told me what they learned from this 5S initiative. We talked about the issues that they overcame, the tools that they put into place for standardization, their ongoing training, different areas of the company in which they then begin to utilize 5S, things that they learned from this 5S implementation with Mike. So it was really interesting to have a chance to look at that and see what they're doing now, see what they learned, and again, see how they're sustaining that effort, which is the key thing. Hernandez and his boss, who's the VP of Operations, Tara Ayers, and her bosses, President Bob Leckinger and CEO Freeman Ford, they're all very much engaged and actively support continuous improvement efforts at FAFCO. And I learned that from talking to Eddie, where he told me really how much the reportage is driven by the management of FAFCO and really what they're doing to make sure that everybody is aligned, that continuous improvement is a key value of FAFCO's, and that they want to know what the reports show, what people are doing, how people are being trained, to make sure that there's a standardization there. It's very important that the standardization is there to make sure that people get the full value out of 5S and out of lean. And again, they're sustaining that by doing those efforts, and it's very hard to do. Sustaining 5S, again, after the initial excitement of the cleaning up and the reorganization, and after you do all that, sustaining it is a little harder. It really takes some discipline to do that. And I think that it's really maybe the part of 5S that people fall down on very, very often. And that's why we're really talking about this so much. And that's why Eddie gave me a good perspective on what they're doing to make sure they're sustaining that. To have another perspective on this, I wanted to play a little clip here for you, a little minute and a half clip from the series that we developed, again, Creating and Sustaining Lean Improvements. And this is episode 23, which is part of the 5S set. And it specifically talks about sustainment and specifically talks about what Mike Mickelwright calls the 5S challenge, the challenge to, again, sustain and to get the value out of 5S going forward. So I want to take a minute or two here. I want you to look at this clip. Really good. It also contains some very interesting before and after pictures of FAFCO's 5S process. So let's play that clip now and we can take a look.
Now, the 5S challenge. Now that you have initiated Standardize and Sustain, it is time to keep it going. This is where you are as an organization will really be tested. Can you maintain that discipline? Will all levels of management display their dedication and discipline every single day? Will 5S become routine and expected so that there will never be a need to complete another 5S project? Remember, there's no need to do a project again if we're doing it right. 5S, once again, is not just about housekeeping and organization and visual management. It is much deeper than that. It is about creating a system in which all people can work effectively and not get blamed for things outside of their control. It is about respect for people and creating a harmonious environment in which people can be productive and safe and create a high-quality product or service. It is the foundation of lean and must be done effectively. Otherwise, your entire lean journey and your hoped-for results are in jeopardy. Do it the right way, completely, every day. Do it the 5S way. I'm Mike Mickelwright. Thank you.
Well, it's amazing. You can see there's the before and afters, and just having walked the FAFCO manufacturing floor there, again, their maintenance department, just a few weeks back, it still looks that way. I mean, they've really done a great job of maintaining and sustaining that. And I think it's really a kudos to them for doing that. They've really embraced that idea that you've got to continue doing it. It's continuous improvement. This is something that I had to learn that I didn't really understand. The difference between continuous improvement and continual improvement. Continual improvement, is this idea that you're going to, it's almost stuttery. It's almost like, you do some improvement, you stop and you let it hang out, and then you do some more. Right. And then you stop and you hang out and you do some more. And you're always constantly stopping and starting. Well, continuous is much smoother. Continuous means you're always, daily, hourly, looking at what you're doing, making adjustments, making that the new standard. And that's what FAFCO's done. They've really done an excellent job of doing this in their facility.
So this was put in place a year ago.
More than a year ago, yeah.
More than a year ago,
yeah.
and they're still doing it.
Like I say, it looks exactly like that now. It's actually improved a little bit from that. They have some more shadow boards now there. Check out my article. Again, it's right below the player page, right down there. Check out the article, and you can see some more before and after shots. You can see a little bit more video clips in that article. Also, make sure you check out www.360performancecircle.com. You can get out there and check out the video series, a few video series that we have on there on lean and G&D and some other training opportunities. Really good stuff there. So check that out too, and get some information, because it's really interesting to see what some of these companies are doing to improve themselves. Really good stuff.
Exactly. Okay. Well, robots. They're faster, they're better, they're cheaper, and that's the truth. You can't really get away from it. And they are becoming more and more ubiquitous in the manufacturing world. And this has led to actually a bit of a skills problem. Matt Kelland talks about this in his article, Engineering in the New Industrial Revolution, Part 2. There's also a Part 1 that kind of sets this up, but Part 2 is where he kind of gets into the skills gap. And he's not talking about, let's say, a skills gap just from students coming out of high school, or let's say vocational technical schools. He's talking about, and they're coming out and they don't have, let's say, the high-tech manufacturing skills that they need for the high-tech floor. What he's talking about is actual engineers who aren't ready for the factory floor, particularly when robotics or manufacturing automation is involved. Kelland implies that being an engineer in today's robotic manufacturing facility really takes a much more rounded individual than engineering schools might be pumping out. And the issue is that schools teach the various engineering disciplines in silos. You got your IT folks, your EEs, your process guys and gals, you got your operation folks, and so forth. And the thing is, today's automated factory requires that everybody understands everybody else's job, because automation requires and takes input from all of these different disciplines. So you might think, as an example, how in the world would does an engineer design a robot, or a programmer program a robot, if he or she doesn't understand, really understand the process in which that robot is supposed to function? They can't do it. You have to understand the whole context which that robot functions in order to program it or design it. So Kelland has a great quote from Steve Hechtman of Inductive Automation, and Hechtman specializes in integrating industrial control systems. Hechtman says, when I go into a client, I'd ask to operate the process for a day to get how it actually works and what really matters to them. You're surrounded by millwrights, hydraulics guys, electricians, and chemists, and so on. You don't need to be able to do their jobs, but if you're the computer guy, you need to know what they're doing and why. So that's that whole idea where he's a programmer, he's an automations guy. He can't go in there and start doing what he needs to do for his job, which is programming and setting up the automation, unless he understands the process. It doesn't make sense. And the unfortunate thing, as Kelland points out, is that you don't get that kind of knowledge typically in standard engineering classes. The knowledge basically is learned, and hands-on, kind of on-the-job training. Now, educators have been paying attention to this. We hear about the skills gap all the time, and educators are trying to address it, as Kelland points out. And he points to, let's say, the mechatronics program at ECPI College of Technology in Virginia. Kevin Paveglio, who runs the mechatronics degree program at ECPI, explains that anymore, even physical maintenance is a skilled job, particularly in an automated factory. Paveglio says you still need a guy with a wrench and a can of grease and micrometers. But he also needs to recognize whether our problem is electrical, mechanical, software, or some combination of all of them. And those skills just aren't easy to teach. And that is where some of the skills gap that we've talked about in the past comes in. You can have a very skilled maintenance person, a very skilled computer programmer, a very skilled engineer. But anymore, the breadth of skills required to do the job well in today's modern factory is much wider than any of those disciplines, and as a consequence, harder to find. Some companies are taking matters into their own hands. Siemens and BMW, for instance, as Kelland points out, have started training the next generation engineering workforce themselves. We've talked about this before. If we can't find them on the outside, we're just going to start training them from the inside, including sometimes bringing in people to train and then hire. Other companies and industry organizations are partnering with universities to try to get the skills into the educational system, into the curriculum. But as anybody who's dealt with an educational system, higher education, that's a long-term process. You don't just all of a sudden, hey, start teaching this, and next semester they start teaching it. It takes years to get this kind of thing into the educational system. And of course, in those years that pass, technology is gone, ballistic, right? So in general, that's what Kelland is talking about, that technology, particularly automation and robotics, is growing faster than the skills can be taught or introduced into the curriculum. And he notes that you could have been an engineer for 50 years only to see your entire industry change in a couple of years. And this, now requiring skills that you never would have guessed you needed. So the educational and training need is great. And not just via traditional education. Kelland points out, or hints, I should say, that another thing that's really required is really within the company itself, or really within the organization, where you've really got to practice cross-disciplinary collaboration, adaptability, and creativity. Everybody has to understand everybody else's job and be able to adapt to quickly changing technology in order to help themselves and the company, but as part of helping the company, you're going to help yourself, right? So that's really what it comes down to, is just this need as the workforce technology grows so quickly with robotics and automation, that we're not ramping up fast enough educational-wise, and we're actually struggling in a way to find the way to fill that gap, either feeding back into education, which is slow, or taking it upon ourselves to teach the people that we need to come in, or simply training within industry, training within our own companies to bring people up to speed. But even then, it's just technology is growing so fast. I mean, what it comes down to is like, you could learn something this year that next year is like, if you haven't stayed on top of it, you're completely behind.
Yeah. And it's something we've talked about in different spaces too, this idea that you need to understand what's really going on. I mean, it's not actually that hard to train somebody to run certain sequences and press buttons and do things. But the skills, we see this in metrology, we've seen it in 3D metrology with CMSC, with their certification program. We've seen it with statistics, we talk about that too. It's like you need to know what is going on. You don't just want to be able to do the functions. It's like
right. You have to have the big picture. You have to get it.
It's like your teacher says, "Show me your math." I don't want to just know what the answer is. I mean, so that's the problem: is learning all that's going into, and the programming of these things in robotics can be immense. So that's the issue. It's like it's not that hard to teach somebody. Well, go do that. After a couple of months, he probably can get it down well enough to do it. But if something goes wrong, or if you get a result that doesn't make sense, can you open the hood and find out what's really happening?
Exactly, and that was kind of the example he was given with the maintenance guy.
Yeah.
It's gone beyond simply, I got to measure this or put some oil in that or whatever. That person has to really understand the entire process and understand, to a certain extent, the programming, what the program's trying to do. Is it electrical? Is it software? Does it just need to be maintained, oiled, calibrated, whatever? Has to understand all that now, and that just wasn't true 10 years ago,
Yeah, not
20
that many years ago.
It wasn't that long ago.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just grown so fast.
Wow.
So I kind of, it's funny, I can get passionate about this because, a lot of people kind of poo-poo the skills gap. It's not really a skills gap. It's, companies don't want to pay what, people coming out of college are worth. But it's like, no, you look at what's coming out of college and you got to understand, curriculum lags the real world by several years. And in technology, several years just puts you light years behind the real world.
And it's getting worse.
And it's getting worse.
It's not getting better. So the idea that people like Helen, are smart guys, smart people like this are understanding this and trying to figure out some solutions, and industry and academia together, I think, will hopefully address that going forward. All right, well, that's our show. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you, Jamie Chumas of Sparta, for joining us earlier today to talk about data and dashboards and decision making. Reminder, Jamie and Dirk, of course, are doing a webinar on that very topic next week, Tuesday, September 15th. That webinar is at 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific. And Dirk and Jamie are going to be talking about this for a good long hour. It should be a nice discussion, and certainly, as always in our webinars, your questions are encouraged. So check that out if you haven't signed up for it yet. Read Jamie's story right down there. You can register there, or keep an eye on your email inbox. We'll send you another reminder about that on Monday. You can register for it then. So again, that's our show. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you, Dirk, for being here, as always. I always appreciate that. It's great to see you on Fridays. And
where else are we going to go?
That's right. So everybody out there, you guys have a great weekend, and we'll see you next week.
Okay, so long.
Bye.